The hour of 1 o'clock having arrived, I'll call this meeting of the House Ag Finance and Policy
Recording in progress.
Committee meeting to order. Okay. A couple of housekeeping items. A quorum is present, and Representative Harder, have you had a chance to check over the minutes?
Yes, Your Honor, I have it.
Any discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Couple of housekeeping again. Joining us remotely is Representative Gander, and I see he's with us. And Chair Hansen, you have an announcement too?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to welcome Representative-elect David Gottfried, Representative-elect for about 2.5 more hours, but is joining us today, not in an official capacity, but will be with the committee from now on. So Representative Gottfried, welcome.
And welcome Representative Gottfried, or soon-to-be Representative Gottfried. We have 5 bills on the agenda, 5 or 6. We should get through them with plenty of time to spare. And with that, I have 1 bill to present, and we'll do the musical chairs again.
All right, the first bill on the agenda is House File 2155. Chair Anderson, would you like to move your bill?
I move the House File 2155 be referred to the General Register, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair Anderson moves House File 2155 be referred to the General Register. Chair Anderson, please present your bill. Thanks,
Madam Chair. 2155 repeals a couple of language statutes that were given. This was given to us by the Department of Ag. I'd like your support to send this bill to the General Register as a vehicle bill. And the two one is a rabies proclamation, the other is a sale of branded livestock provision. And evidently these have become outdated, and this was given to us by the Department of Ag, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Is there anyone who would like to testify for or against House File 2155? Seeing none. Is there any discussion from members? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could just get the department to go on the record in favor, if they would, that would be great.
The department is here, Madam Chair.
Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, for the record, my name is Michelle Medina, and I serve as Director of Government Relations for the Department of Ag and the Board of Animal Health. And yes, this is language supported by the department and the board. It's obsolete language that just needs to be deleted.
Thank you. Representative Hansen? No. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from members? All right. Chair Anderson, would you like to renew your motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, renew my motion that the House File 2155 be referred to the General Register.
Thank you. Chair Anderson renews his motion that House File 2155 be referred to the General Register. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails, and House File 2155 is on its way to the General Register.
Next up, we have House File 1524. Representative Harder, would you care to move your bill?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I move that House File 1524 be re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law, and this has to do with the privacy data section in the bill.
Very good. Representative. To your bill, Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and committee members, for giving us the opportunity today to discuss this bill. Over the past several years, there have been many discussions regarding the nutrients that farmers use to grow crops. We know that fertilizer is an essential component to healthy crop production. When fertilizer application is not managed well, farmers' profit can be diminished and there is potential nutrient runoff. Farmers are increasingly challenged to balance rising input costs, increasing demand for higher yields, and have the responsibility to be good stewards of our land. It is important to look at many options in managing fertilizer. Being proactive and looking for solutions will help farmers. House File 1524 is one of these options in establishing a grant program to support agriculture retailers who work with farmers. The proposal utilizes a voluntary, incentive-based approach to leverage the expertise of our ag retailers using best management practices. And then I will turn it over to my testifiers for more details on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Lee Helgen, Executive Director with the Minnesota Crop Production Retailers, the statewide association of all the retailers and co-ops who provide support and help for farmers with the inputs of the side of the project. With me, I have Amy Robach from Central Soda, who can talk a little bit more in detail. We are really appreciative of the opportunity to talk about this industry-based management practices approach to dealing with nutrient management. In your packets, you have this handy 4R pocket guide, and I'd encourage you to take a look through this as we discuss the proposal today. It's got kind of a really nice overview of the 4Rs and some examples on how that would actually impact the farm field. What this bill does is takes a common sense approach built around the 4R principles, and those principles are the right source. So choosing the best type of fertilizer. There are a lot of different options, working with the growers to get the best type of fertilizer. The right rate. Just using what is needed based on what the farm field is telling you and the soils are telling you. The right time, making sure that the fertilizer and the materials are being applied at the right time can really matter. And then the right place, which is trying to keep that where the plants can actually utilize the nutrition coming from those nutrients. What the bill will do, it takes a voluntary incentive-based approach by providing financial support to the ag retailers who help producers implement the 4R management practices. We provide in the bill a $5,000 payment for the co-ops to become 4R certified. So to go through a process where we would evaluate and audit them to make sure that they're meeting these 4R practices and have the record keeping essential. And then for those that are certified or are on the path to certification, they'd become eligible to receive payments for up to about 50 cents an acre for being able to document which of those practices are being implemented on the farm fields in their area. An additional 25 cents if they're using a certified crop advisor. The certified crop advisors in the industry would be the recognized professional credential that we'd there, and we were definitely trying to increase the number of CCAs available in the state. And then some support for doing education and training to farmers and other stakeholders to explain the 4Rs, how this can be beneficial for the community and for their crops and optimizing efficiency and profitability at the farm level. Next, I'd like to introduce Amy Robach. She is with Central Soda Co-op, and she could talk a little bit more about the value of the 4R approach and how this can be leveraged with other programs operating in the state. Ms. Robach.
Thank you.
Welcome. Identify yourself for the record, and we'll hear your testimony.
Thank you. For the record, I am Amy Roebuck, the lead environmental specialist with Central Soda Co-op, a farm input supplier based in central Minnesota. I currently reside on a beef, hog, and crop farm with my husband and 2 children in Little Falls, Minnesota. I have 10 years experience working with the cooperative as a technical service provider, providing conservation assistance with producers across the state of Minnesota. The 4R Stewardship Certification Program encourages ag retailers and independent crop consultants to adopt proven and adopted best management practices through the 4 Rs while considering specific individual farmers' needs. The 4R approach is not focused on one specific type of product or isolated practice, but more a holistic farm approach, where you can evaluate the options and select that right strategy for that producer. Also working at the cooperative level, you can work across multiple farm fields and achieve a larger scale impact on that nutrient management. This bill identifies keys adopted best management practices surrounding nutrient management. These practices are designed to reduce nutrient losses to Minnesota lakes and rivers, improve soil fertility, and ensure farmers get the most value out of their fertilizer investment while protecting the environment. These practices can include, but of course are not limited to, soil testing every 4 years, use of enhanced efficiency fertilizers, variable rate nutrient applications, in-season nutrient management using the real-time monitoring and decision support tools, cover cropping to improve nutrient cycling and reducing losses, irrigation water management, and of course, edge of field conservation practices to minimize runoff. And of course, Minnesota CCAs play an important role in the adoption of these 4R practices at that farm gate. These professionals provide a technical expertise needed to implement these site-specific, data-driven nutrient management plans. By supporting CCAs, we provide farmers a trusted and science-based guidance, making sure informed decisions for their land and businesses, ensuring the return on investment is protected. This investment at the farm gate contributes significantly to developing a cohesive and efficient landscape. By embracing this method of delivering conservation technical assistance, we can inspire a remarkable shift in the adoption and drive a positive change at an accelerated pace.
Thank you, Ms. Robach. You mentioned you work with farmers across the state.
Correct.
Is your area of coverage that large?
I provide technical assistance not only for our co-op, but also producers that would like to assess my technical and my team's technical assistance across the state.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear the things available to farmers today that were not available 10, 15 years ago. It's really a rapidly changing and advancing topic. And again, the aim is to do it right, the 4 Rs, and it's expensive, the stuff we put on the crops, and to do it the right way is extremely important. Is there anybody in the audience who would care to testify on this bill, 1524? If not, we'll open it up to discussion by members. Representative Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, this is one of these things where there's a burden of memory that I have on this. You know, the 4 Rs have been around so long that I can remember working on it at the Department of Ag over 20 years ago. It's not new. It's been around, as is the voluntary approach that we decided as a state to do in 1989 with the Groundwater Protection Act. And we've invested millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on voluntary management practices. Now, at the time, and I remember sitting through all these meetings with the university, developing best management practices for water quality, and we kept coming back to the issue of profitability for the farmer rather than production. That if you reduce the use of fertilizer, you may be reducing your input costs, and you could maybe have not as high of a yield, but you would have profitability because of you would be making more on the bushels you're producing because you didn't spend as much. And with water quality best management practices, they don't impact the resource as much. So that's 36 years ago now. And we have focused on the voluntary management practices. I remember when we had certified crop advisors that we were going to encourage certified crop advisors because they could be a service that would make up for the loss of revenue from the lack of fertilizer sales or the reduced fertilizer sales. You'd sell the service for better management, and having certified crop advisors would be a service for the farmer. Now, what's happened over those 35, 36 years, we've had great consolidation and monopolization. We don't have the really local co-op, and maybe have multiple sites under one ownership. And with that consolidation of retailers, there used to be a lot of retailers, there are fewer now, but that profit motive comes in sales, selling product. And selling product, which is deductible as a cost of doing business, the excess nitrates show up in the water. Now, we spent 2 years talking about old water and new water, and oh, it's grandpa's fault, and now we know, we've done the research, and it's not grandpa's fault, it's not dad's fault. It's, in some areas of the state, very recent applications. So rather than a polluter pays model, now this is one of many bills coming forward where the industry is asking the taxpayer to pick up the cost without any evidence that will make any difference. After 36 years of voluntary management practices, now the state is being asked to pay even more. The taxpayers are being asked to pay even more with no assurance or evidence that will make any difference if the last 36 years have not made any difference. So why would this work? How is this going to work differently if we spend taxpayer money on it when we've already spent the taxpayer money on the best management practices and cost share and subsidies and assistance throughout the state? What's going to make this different with more taxpayer money being spent? A brand-new program with more spending.
One of the things I like about this program is your ability to attract a large number of acres. A lot of us have certified our farms into the water quality certification program. There's over 1 million acres enrolled in that currently. But at your business level, you can work with farmers and attract the number of acres to really make a difference. And I think using the tools you talked about, it does make a difference. Less fertilizer per bushel produced, and again, in this economy, it behooves all of us to reduce input costs wherever we can because of the negative cash flows at a lot of these crops. Any other comments from members?
Mr. Chair, I think I had asked
a question,
what was going to be different this time?
Representative Vang.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Chair Hansen would like to testify to respond to his statement, and then you can come back to me.
Apologize for that. Mr. Helgen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Hansen. I think what we think would be different with this approach is the number of acres that we could get to. So we looked at the Ag Water Quality Certification Program as being a good model that gets a little over 1 million acres. When we were talking with our crop advisors and others where they may be touching hundreds of thousands of acres, if we could go through the 4R approach with our certified program and the crop advisors really working with more farmers, we could potentially get more acreage covered and documented and reported into the system. So at scale, moving more farmers to adopt more better practices would be what would be the game changer in this case.
Follow-up, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the fatal flaw in all of our water quality programs. Acres enrolled does not mean water quality improved, because one size does not fit all. So there's land that is extremely vulnerable to water quality contamination. Not all acres are equal, but everything we do, we measure acres enrolled. We're measuring an input, not an outcome.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. And we've before had these discussions about the carrot or the stick, mandatory, voluntary programs. And just for my 2 cents, we have had a mandatory program since 2015, the buffer bill. I haven't seen any sterling results from that either, but we've had many years of consternation among farmers for having land taken away without compensation for a mandatory program in the state. So I'm not sure that's the total answer either. Any final comments, Representative Harder? Well, a question from whom? Representative Vang, I didn't see you, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo how strange this is, because this is a private entity who made their own certification and is asking the state to pay for it. And you know, we've talked about water quality issues for in the last session, and we know that the ag water certification is not doing enough to address our water quality concerns. And so I guess my question will be, is your certification more stringent than the ag water certification? Like what is the progress that we're trying, what is the metric that you have will be better than what we currently have at the state?
Ms. Robach or Mr. Helgen, either one of you.
Maybe I'll start on that, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. Thank you, Representative Vang. So the ag water quality certification would operate at the farm level, so at the individual farmer. So you're going through their criteria, evaluating how they're implementing the water quality certification standards. And so that's been successful, and I think people would look at the 1 million acres that we've achieved out of that as being a positive. This certification is based on what the international groups have been working on for years. So the Fertilizer Canada and the Fertilizer Institute and other industry partners have implemented this, and it's happening in multiple states. So Ohio has a pretty robust program. They have a robust program down in Missouri. They have a program in the Mid-Atlantic states where they're showing that they're actually having an impact, reducing the amount of nutrient and managing water quality outcomes by having the certification there. Because our certification would have about 19 standards that we'd walk through each facility to make sure that they have good record keeping, that they have good rationale for the recommendations that they're making to the growers, and that we have a way to document that. And what that does is then would open up the per acre payment. So it may keep it focused and limited where we know we have good operators working.
Representative Vang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't hear any demonstrable progress or metric from what this certification can do to improve our water quality concerns. I also find it very problematic that we are going to subsidize a private entity in doing the work that they're supposed to be doing already. So I'll just keep my comments short, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we take this seriously.
Further comments from members? If not, the intent is to move this to the Judiciary Committee, so we will take a vote on it. Seeing no call for anything else, all those in favor of House File 1524 being sent to Judiciary signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
The ayes have it, and the motion is passed. And would care to renew your motion, Representative Harder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair Anderson, I renew my motion that House File 1524 be re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law. Thank you for your time.
And okay, very good. Next up is House File 821. This bill will be laid over. Representative Jacob will assume the testifier's table. And Representative Jacob, would you care to move your bill?
I do. I move House File 821 before the committee today.
Very good. To your bill, Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and committee members for hearing my bill today. So I left my glasses over here.
That's one I haven't heard before for a while. Anybody have some cheaters?
We'll attempt to read it without glasses.
Go ahead, Representative.
Okay. This bill, Bill 821, is a bill to continue appropriations that will help supply safe drinking water to households in southeast Minnesota who depend on well water. The bill would continue and enhance the appropriation of $2.8 million that was included in the 2024 supplemental agriculture budget. House File 821 would appropriate $3.866 million per year to provide water treatment systems and well repairs to low-income and vulnerable households whose water is above the safe levels for nitrate. There are a broad range of responses to the issues of nitrates in the groundwater in southeast Minnesota. This bill specifically funds the public health response. This bill targets water treatment and well repair funds to lower income households and households with people particularly vulnerable to nitrate pollution. The current program is working, but is funded with one-time money. This problem requires a sustained response, which is why House File 821 is needed. So with me today, Jay Eidsness from MCEA to speak more about the proposal.
Mr. Eidsness, identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Jay Eidsness, and I'm a senior staff attorney at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. MCEA is a public interest law firm and advocacy organization with over 50 years of experience defending Minnesota's environment and the health of its people. MCEA strongly supports House File 821, and we thank Representative Jacob for authoring this important bill. 3/4 of Minnesotans depend on groundwater for their drinking water, and about 1/4 of Minnesota households access groundwater through their own well. Now, municipal water systems must test for a range of contaminants and ensure that water does not exceed safe limits. And private well owners, on the other hand, are responsible for their own testing and water treatment if needed. Now, for low-income and vulnerable households, this can be a real problem. Every Minnesotan, whether they depend on a municipal water supply or their own well, should know that the water coming out of their kitchen faucet is safe for their family to drink. The unique geology in southeastern Minnesota makes groundwater particularly vulnerable to contamination. In that part of the state, surface and groundwater is connected through springs, bringing groundwater to the surface, and the porous limestone connects the surface to the groundwater. The township well testing program has documented that a significant number of wells in this region have unsafe levels of a number of pollutants, including nitrate. Now, well testing is growing in southeastern Minnesota, some of which is due to Clean Water Fund appropriations to provide free tests. But what happens if somebody gets their well tested, finds unsafe levels of nitrate, but they lack the resources to install a treatment system or repair their well? That's where HF 821 steps in to provide these resources. So this bill would appropriate just over $3.8 million per year to the Department of Agriculture to continue the water treatment program that began in 2024. It would prioritize installing treatment systems and repairing wells in low-income households below 300% of the federal poverty line and in households with vulnerable people. It would allow the Department of Agriculture to work with the Department of Health on this program as well. Minnesotans' understanding of nitrate pollution has grown over the past few years, and the state of Minnesota is rising to this challenge. There are several dimensions of this response, and one of which is the public health response. The 2024 supplemental budget included $2.8 million for this public health response, but this was just a down payment. It's critical that this legislature continues to invest in clean, safe drinking water for well owners. We should all agree that accessing safe drinking water is essential. House File 821 is an opportunity to work together to ensure that Minnesota households aren't left behind. Please support House File 821, and thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm Ivana Stark, State Director of Clean Water Action Minnesota. Our goal is to ensure that all water is drinkable, swimmable, and fishable for generations to come. I'm here on behalf of our tens of thousands of members to support House File 821. This committee is well versed in nitrate contamination in Minnesota and the risk this contamination possesses, such as seizures, difficulty breathing, and even cancer. Private wells in particular are at risk, and this funding will help ensure Minnesota families have access to safe and clean drinking water. As someone who grew up on her grandparents' hobby farm outside of Albert Lee, drinking well water, I shudder to think what the water was in the water that I drank and swam in. But also, the need for supporting these families with well repairs and treatment systems is truly impactful. Unexpected, large dollar bills such as this can be extremely difficult for families on fixed incomes to manage. Thank you for the continuation of such a vital program. I know many people who lived near my grandparents could not have been able to address the contamination in their wells without financial assistance. We're particularly appreciative of the attention paid to Minnesotans living below the poverty line, infants, and pregnant individuals. We know infants and young children are at a higher risk for negative health impacts from nitrate exposure, such as blue baby syndrome. This gives our most vulnerable community members much needed protection. We must address the cycle of polluting, cleaning, and so on. This is an important step in that cycle. We have a duty to protect the most vulnerable Minnesotans and wholeheartedly support House File 821 and are glad to see bipartisan support as well. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Jay.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I wish I had those answers at the top of my head. I don't, unfortunately. I would defer if there's representatives from the Department of Agriculture who might be able to shed some insight into that. I'd be happy to defer that question to them.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Margaret Wagner, and I manage the fertilizer non-point section at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. The department received an appropriation of $2.8 million that became available on July 1st of this past year. And during that time, or since that time, we've invested those dollars and set up a program for well mitigation along with partners in southeast Minnesota. So specifically to answer your question about numbers, we did establish a joint powers agreement with Olmsted County. We're working through Olmsted County, who's partnering with the other counties in the region to deliver this program. So the first step in that was a joint powers agreement, passing money through to work with contractors and install the reverse osmosis system. So to date, 150 reverse osmosis systems have been installed, and that number continues to grow every day as we have all the contracts and systems in place to deliver that service.
Very good, thank you. Well, what about the number of wells dug, new wells dug?
Yeah, so the question of how many new wells dug. At this time, the program is specific for reverse osmosis systems. That's why we have a contract in place for. The second part of that appropriation language directed the Department of Agriculture to work with the Minnesota Department of Health to stand up a private well mitigation program. Within that program, we'll see opportunities for well repairs and replacements. And we're in the process of writing that interagency agreement with the Department of Health and passing those initial dollars through right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, from a public health concern, I understand the triage of trying to make sure that we're protecting public health, or whether it's methemoglobinemia or the synergy between nitrates and various pesticides in terms of health impacts on people. But this is the day then when the environmental groups appear to have given up on prevention and decided that we are just going to open up the taxpayers to pay for the cleanup costs. We used to say prevention is better than cleanup, but apparently we're not, unless there's massive public money going in. So if we're spending millions and we're hitting 150 wells, and that's just reverse osmosis, versus 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50K for replacing a well. And, you know, 2 years ago, there was complaints or almost mocking when it was that it's the well owner's fault for having an old well. That's why they have nitrate contamination. Absolving of responsibility of the people who put on the fertilizer or even poor septic systems. So here we go. You know, this was, if we have to do this, then it's pretty hard to make people responsible for cleaning up their own mess when somebody else will pay for it. That's where we're at.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I had a more technical question. Thank you, Rep. Jago, for bringing this. Obviously, this is from our area of the state and is very important for our region, so thank you for bringing this. My question specifically to the representative from the department is specifically around the language about prioritizing households at or below 300% of the federal poverty guideline. I'm glad that's there, but I'm curious in practice how that works out. Do landowners report their federal income? What happens if you get a whole lot of applications of people who are above that and only a handful who are below? I'm just curious how the department deals with that language specifically.
Go ahead.
Specific to that language, that's been incorporated into the program that's been stood up at the local level. So that is part of the criteria that's evaluated when people apply for a treatment system. Based on the number of responses, we haven't had to prioritize. At this point, the people that have applied have been, the funding has been available to immediately implement those systems. So It is built in, and as we work with our local partners, they have experience, I guess, qualifying people's participation in these types of programs. So essentially qualifying or reviewing the financial information that someone would use to qualify for programs that indicate that they are at that level of below that poverty line. So we worked, this is a big discussion that we have as we negotiated the contract with our local partners, and it's in place, but we haven't had to use it because the demand is not greater than the amount of dollars that are available.
Representative Smith?
That's helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions from members? I guess I would follow up then on my question on wells dug. So from the $2.8 million you received last July, is there money left in the account, I would assume, from doing 150 osmosis systems? Ms. Wagner?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yes, there's money available in the account. So we're working on that right now. There was $1 million that was put into a joint powers agreement, and then we're talking about putting money through an interagency agreement, and there's additional funding available.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members? Seeing none. Again, this bill is going to be laid over. Representative Jacobs, any final comments? Good
Yes,
job
thank
reading,
you.
by the way.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I would like to maybe just respond to Representative Hansen. You know, I've worked on as many water resource boards as I could throughout 10 years on the Winona County Board of Commissioners, and now you see me active here in Environment and Ag. And I worked very diligently to try to bring both sides of the issue to the table. But your words are divisive, this make polluters pay. The realities in southeast Minnesota include substandard wells, not built to code. That's not a responsibility of the farmer. It's just a reality that we face. The towns of Lewiston, Altura, Utica, their municipal wastewater ponds emptied into the groundwater. That's another thing that the farmers are not responsible for. Naturally occurring nitrogen. When it snows and you're in a karst geology like what we are in southeast Minnesota, you just said it yourself just before I came up here. That water can get into that snowmelt can get into the groundwater very quickly and can affect the amount of nitrogen that are in these wells. And I'm here to admit farmers contribute, but we all need to work together to solve the issue, not just point fingers. So I'll just leave it at that, and I encourage support for my bill today. Thank you.
No further comments. With that, I'll renew the motion that Representative Jacobs' Bill 821 is laid over. Next up on the agenda, you stay there, Representative Jacobs, House File 363, property tax credit established for certain acres certified under the Water Quality Certification Program. And Representative Jacobs, this is going to be an informational hearing since your bill is currently in the tax committee. We wanted to hear it here and tell members about the status of your bill. You've been working on this now for 3 years and hope to see some progress this year. So Representative Jacobs, to your bill, House File 363.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you for pointing out this is an informational only hearing today. So House File 363, also known as the Ag Water Quality Certification Bill, is a bipartisan bill that ties a $5 per acre tax credit to any acres in the outlined 8-county area in southeast Minnesota that are enrolled in the Ag Water Quality Certification Program. The bill is a response to a petition filed to the EPA in 2023 with concerns about nitrate levels in the wells in that area that exceed safe drinking water standards. It should be noted that when this bill comes before the tax committee, I will be amending it so that the bill will draw the funds from the Clean Water Fund. Today I have Mr. Brad Redlin here with me to just discuss some of the benefits of the Ag Water Quality Certification Program. So I'd like to turn it over to Brad.
Welcome. Identify yourself and proceed, Mr. Redlin.
Thank you. My name is Brad Jodal Redlin. I manage a conservation services section at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Allow me to note at the outset that I welcome this opportunity to discuss this bill. It is not contained within the governor's budget, so this doesn't constitute an endorsement on behalf of the department, but this particular mechanism, a tax credit to incent the certification program or participation incentive program, has long been a topic of conversation. We've received recommendations to do so through our advisory committee and from other public input. So happy to discuss this option to increase participation in water quality certification program. I guess try to give a real quick overview of the water quality certification program. It's been mentioned a little bit already this afternoon. Water quality certification is a risk assessment process. We send out, well, upon a voluntary request of participating producers, we provide them with a licensed, certified water quality certifier who is accredited through agronomy and conservation planning at the state and federal level to work one-on-one with the grower to risk assess their entire operation, all land, rented or owned, all types of crops or agriculture production management on every parcel to identify what the risks are. One of those risks been talked about today, for instance, is fertilization. So water quality certification, all certified farms will have to abide by the land grant institution's best management practices for fertilizer management, for instance, those 4 Rs that are established at the University of Minnesota. That's an aspect that every water quality certified farm will have to meet. But it only just starts there. The rest of the water quality certification process, as I said, reviews the entire operation on the physical site of all those parcels to see what risks may be present. These things could be slopes. They could be the tillage that occurs. That could be the pesticide use. It could be any number of things that all need to be assessed and those risks mitigated in order for that certification to exist. We determine whether it's in a sensitive area, whether it's a drinking water management supply area, and the practices that are then enacted for certification purposes are to treat for those conditions that exist on that particular parcel, portion of parcel, or portion of a farm. So the way the certification program works, again, it's just the whole farm comprehensive risk assessment throughout the entire operation, one-on-one with a accredited professional to work with that grower to certify that farm. That farm certification then exists for a 10-year period with reviews of that farm throughout the period. We call these reviews really additional service opportunities to the grower to see how things have changed, any challenges they are experiencing along the way through their period of certification. We just really enjoy the fact that we have these relationships. We have these professional advisors who essentially are free to the grower to work with them throughout that 10-year period for all challenges that may arise and opportunities they have for conservation assistance. So I'm really happy to discuss the program further and in great detail. I can note that we do GIS map and track all practices implemented, so we know exactly what outcomes are. I will often say, simply because it's true, anyone who wants to know the outcomes of a practice or a management change on water quality certification program, we can provide it. It's and if you want a particular metric or mechanism or model that you want to use, we can use it. Know where every practice change has happened, every management change has happened, and we are happy to report them. We want to justify our work every day. That what we achieve through the interventions that occur through the water quality certification program. So just noting that while we can report the phosphorus savings and the soil loss prevented and all that sort of thing, if there's another metric anyone ever wants, we can dial it up because we have those records and we know what our producers are doing out there. So we're always excited to do that kind of work. I guess I stop myself before I keep going too much further. But again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the great work that our certifiers and our field staff do out there every day.
Thanks, Mr. Redlin. Any questions for the testifiers? Seeing none, our second testifier, Stu Laurie. Stu here.
Just
Welcome and identify yourself.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Stu Laurie, Government Relations Director for Minnesota Farmers Union, and on behalf of MFU, I'm glad to briefly share our support for piloting a $5 per acre tax credit for ag water quality certification in those 8 southeast counties, Rep. Jacobs 363. I'll just highlight a couple, maybe 3 points that I hope build on Mr. Jordal Redland's testimony. First, and just to reiterate, ag water quality certification, from our view, is leading in that it employs that boots on the ground service, helping farmers along that journey. Number one, and two, that it's taking a holistic view. It was mentioned there's no one size fits all, no silver bullet, right? And so we have someone on the farm who's doing that assessment, identifying those risk points, and helping farmers address it and often save money along the way. I'll also just highlight this is targeted at those 8 southeast counties, of course, because it's significant for nitrates. According to the Department of Agriculture and some work that they've done, it's been shown to be a proven tool for improving water quality or reducing nitrogen runoff from certified farms. They've shown up to nearly a 50% reduction in nitrate loss on average from the adoption of conservation practices. And third, just to the program, because it's I think it's important to us and not always highlighted. I can understand when Mr. Jordal Redland wouldn't talk about it, but sometimes folks have questions about accountability. And I can say from our members, we have members who've pursued certification and have not gotten it or not gotten it yet, right? So there is that accountability piece. And even for those that are certified, I think it's really powerful from my view. I think of members who are now the conservation leaders celebrated at the Soil and Water Conservation District in their county, and their journey started with the Ag Water Quality Certification Program, and then through those resources, they've continued to build. So finally, a $5 per acre credit won't necessarily pay for those practices up front, but we do think it's right-sized to generate that interest, increase adoption in those southeast Minnesota counties. The Ag Water Quality Certification Program celebrated 1 million acres in 2023, which is extraordinary, but there's 25 million agriculture acres in the state, and so this kind of incentive could be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laurie. Questions for either one of our testifiers? Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Laurie. So I want to dive into kind of 2A tax policy. So right now, 2A property, I think, is taxed at 1 house and 1 acre, correct? So ag land is not taxed on the total acreage, but is taxed on 1 house and 1 acre. Is that correct?
Mr. Laurie, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Anderson. I fear I may not be able to keep up with you on this, but perhaps someone at the department could. But I think, I guess to my understanding, that would be true if it's homesteaded, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Representative Hanson.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. But let's take the capital levies. So I think now 70% of the capital levy is subsidized by all the taxpayers of the state rather than the property taxpayers in the jurisdiction. Is that correct?
Mr.
Yes,
Laurie?
Sorry, Chair Anderson. The school construction bond levy. Yep. So if the school has a school construction bond levy, then yes, that's reimbursed on the part of the state. Correct.
Chair Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And even the property taxes that you pay are deductible on the income tax. Is that correct?
Mr. Laurie?
I believe that's correct. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for the author. So Representative Jacob, House File 363, is this progressive from this point on for people who enroll, or would this be providing the credit for people who are already enrolled?
Representative Jacob.
It would be anyone who's enrolled or would become enrolled in the 8-county area.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, for example, if you were enrolled, you would get the credit if this passed, right? Or if I was enrolled, I would get the credit. If I enrolled in the future or had enrolled in the past, I would get the credit.
Representative Jacob.
Correct.
Representative Hanson.
I'd ask Mr. Redlin, is there any evidence in any state, anywhere, that $5 per acre is going to improve water quality?
Mr. Redlin.
Mr. Chair, Representative. No.
Representative Hanson.
Enough said.
Further questions from members? I would just say $5 is an incentive. It's not going to pay for a practice. It's a symbolic gesture by this, in my opinion, a symbolic gesture by the state to incentivize enrolling in a practice.
Yeah, can I speak to that?
Representative Jacob.
Sure. So I was given different models, $10, $8, $5, and I'm conservative, so I chose the lowest number. And I have heard that in the southeast area, there's a lot of people lining up for this program. And it's because of the anticipation of this potentially going through. So this is an opportunity to work with not just clean water, but all the effects of agriculture. So fertilizer utilization, erosion control, potential fish kills. This program addresses every aspect of agriculture that we can really think of. And to say the program is rigorous, I was one of the first farms certified more than 10 years ago, and was up for recertification this last year. And I thought, well, I'm a representative. Surely it'll be easy, but it was rigorous to get recertified. So, I mean, this is just an opportunity for everyone to participate, because I look at land owned by the state of Minnesota and how that draws on the taxpayer. So here we have an opportunity for land to be productive, to produce food that probably all of you are eating. And here's an opportunity for everyone to participate in doing the right thing with that property and doing the right thing for our environment. So thank you both, Mr. Laurie and Mr. Redlin, for presenting here today.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think Mr. Redlin has testified before when he started today. You know, this is essentially a risk management tool. And it's a productivity tool, and so with profitability, and I believe you've been able to demonstrate profitability has increased with this productivity management tool, because people know where they can reduce, they know where they can incentivize, they know where they can do certain practices and put those all together. So it goes back to the comment about profitability versus production, that you save money and become more profitable with the tool. That doesn't necessarily mean that water quality is improved. In addition, if we go back 10 years ago or 12 years ago, the initial discussion around the program was about avoiding regulation. People before you stood there and testified and said the purpose of this program was to avoid regulation, because, oh my gosh, we couldn't have regulation. So now 10, 12 years later, I agree that it is a productivity tool, a risk management tool that can provide profitability. And that profitability alone should be an incentive. I think you've been able to demonstrate on farms great productivity management that enhances profitability. But that's different than tax policy. That's different than an outcome on water quality. And when we have random acts of conservation, even though there's a lot of them, we aren't able to see the total outcome. We can model it. We've testified before, we've got modeling that can do that. But when we have, maybe you're taking the pedal off the gas, but somebody else is putting it on. And that's the issue in terms of increased overall use of nitrogen fertilizer in this state year after year.
Mr. Redlin.
Mr. Chair, Representative. A few things there. Yeah, it's a risk assessment process, not a risk management, to be maybe too literal and specific about it, but that's literally what it is. We have these conservation planner professionals who analyze the farm for their environmental impact, and that's the risk we're assessing, is their environmental impact. And you're absolutely correct, and we love talking about the fact that just through the operation of the program, it has shown that those participants who do participate in water quality certification have, for 5 straight years since the studies have began separately by Minnesota State colleges who do that research, that water quality certified farms have always made more money than those farms that were not water quality certified. But we believe that's just maximizing their performance, yes. It's an environmental performance metric that they're maximizing for us. And for that reason, we believe that they're finding that financial reward for it. We greatly appreciate that. The tax credit component that's being discussed today, that's, well, to your previous question, you asked, if $5 credit in another state has improved water quality, and I quite appropriately responded no. The other states don't have water quality certification program, and the tax credit alone is not an environmental act, of course, as you well understand. So that certainly makes for a no answer to that previous question.
Any further questions on this? What's become a pretty controversial, but Representative Vang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for Mr. Redlin. What about the factory farms? Are they ag water certified?
Mr. Redlin?
Chair, Representative, we certify all farms that meet the risk removal on that operation. So any size, shape, type of production can earn certification so long as they mitigate every risk we identify on their operation.
Representative Vang?
Okay, so do you know like a percentage of the factory farms that are ag water certified right now?
Mr. Jordan?
I'm sorry, Chair, Representative. I'm going to rely first on a central aspect of my being able to answer that question, is we don't have a definition of what constitutes a factory farm or what's not a factory farm, so I can't answer on those grounds. I would just say that one of the questions I will often ask myself when I give a presentation is, what is a water quality certified farm? And I say it's any farm it wants to be. So we have a great deal of Minnesota grown farms, and those farms that bring their signs to the farmers market, and those organic farms. We have grass-based farms. We have large-scale production and potato farms. We have all types of farms that get water quality certified. I guess I would say that our average size of our farms that are certified are actually a little higher than the average size in all farms in the state. But we're very pleased to be having that environmental risk assessment being occurred on the most acres possible.
Representative Vang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you for that. I think I will be interested in knowing a little bit more who are the farmers that are ag water certified and which farms have not yet been. I think that will be helpful for us to determine whether this is a worthy model to move forward. This is to the chief author, Representative Jacob. I see that your amendment is going for the Clean Water Fund, which as co-chair of Legacy, I don't think we've had a conversation about that. That is within my jurisdiction in the Legacy Committee. And so I know that this is currently in tax bill. So can you commit that it will go to the Legacy Committee after that?
Representative Jacob?
Yeah, I'm uncertain of the path forward. So at this point, I know it's in taxes, and that's the next stop for it. So,
Representative Vang?
Okay, so then I would hope and expect to see that if you are proceeding with this amendment with the Clean Water Fund, and that's within the Legacy Committee, I will hope that will come to our committee next. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? If not, I'd renew the motion that this is an informational hearing. Thanks to our testifiers and thanks to Representative Jacob for bringing this bill. It is currently in the jurisdiction of the Tax Committee. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Next up, House File 1677, Representative Nelson. And get your testifiers lined up, and Representative Nelson proceed with their bill. This bill, again, will be laid over.
Yeah, hello, I'd like to move House File 1677 before the committee.
Go ahead, Representative Nelson.
So, all right, well, thank you. This bill is developing cover crop, or a market for cover crops for the usages, more than just on farm. About 3 years ago, the legislators started funding some supports in a value-added chain and, kind of developing a market for a continuous living cover crop. And, there's several different crops, or many different crops that can be grown under this. But some of the things like winter camelina or kernza or some of these, they're really, there's a market developing for them, but it's been rather slow. And some of the other crops that are available, there really isn't a market for them. And so oftentimes these, being able to plow them down on the soil or whatever, or terminate the crop and, plant the next one into it is a value. But if, I think part of the thing that we should be looking at is trying to find a larger and alternative markets for the crops that we do grow. There gets to be a lot of people concerned about having monocrop systems, and this is really trying to help develop a market for that. The cover crop is really important to have the diversity and the biology of the soil life. And as we look at some of the challenges of a cover crop, our weather system, maybe even some of the, if you have two grass crops, a corn followed by a rye or something like that, you can end up carrying it can really be a green bridge. You can carry diseases over into another crop the next year. So having a variety of crops that can be grown is important with that. So I think that's some of the things that, having more crops that are available, is important. So I think if we can help develop some of these markets for it. I do grow some cover crops on my farm. Most of them I end up grazing them off with my cattle. And not every farm has livestock on it, and that can be a challenge to what do you do with this crop if it's to help make it fit into the farm well. So, all these things can be a difficult balance, but I would just ask that you would consider helping us find more markets for that. So with that, I do have a couple of testifiers here today, and I'd like to turn it over to them.
Welcome. Identify yourself for the record, and we'll hear your testimony.
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, my name is Peter LaFontaine. I'm hoping you'll allow me to give testimony on behalf of Christopher Abbott, who's caring for a sick son right now. Here are Christopher's remarks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am Christopher Abbott, the founder of Perennial Pantry, a kernza processor and food company in Northfield. We buy kernza perennial grain directly from Minnesota farmers and turn it into pantry staples sold across the country. MDA's Developing Markets for Continuous Living Cover grant program was created in 2022 with bipartisan support because it delivers real, measurable benefits: economic growth in rural communities, new market opportunities for farmers, and better water quality. Since implementation, it has been consistently oversubscribed, with business requests exceeding available funding. Minnesota has invested in developing over 15 new crops through the University of Minnesota's Forever Green initiative. These crops, like kernza, keep living roots in the ground year-round, strengthening soil, protecting water, and creating economic opportunities for farmers and businesses like mine. The science is proven, but to realize their full potential, they need markets. This is where entrepreneurs come in, taking on the risk of building supply chains, developing products, and creating demand. This grant program expands the umbrella of state support to help businesses bridge the gap from research to impact. As a recipient, I've seen firsthand how this funding helps. With our grants, we've operationalized a new production bakery in Northfield, focused on perennial crops, hired employees, and partnered with small towns like Edgerton, where Kernza plantings have already reduced nitrate levels in city water by 40%. These are real outcomes with real economic and environmental value. Bringing new crops to market takes time and investment. Grants like this provide critical early support, ensuring Minnesota's leadership in agricultural innovation translates into jobs, business growth, and cleaner water. The demand is clear. More businesses want it, more farmers want to grow these crops, and more communities stand to benefit. We're at a pivotal moment for agriculture in Minnesota. Could the next generation of great Minnesota businesses emerge for these crops? It's entirely possible. Could we dramatically reduce nitrate pollution in drinking water across the state? Yes, if we get these crops on enough acres. Momentum requires investment. The public benefits deserve continued public support, and this program is an efficient, market-driven, bipartisan success that strengthens small businesses, reinforces Minnesota's leadership in agricultural innovation, and helps farmers reduce input costs while improving soil and water health. I urge you to continue supporting and expanding this program to unlock even greater opportunities for our economy, our farmers, and our rural communities. Thanks for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mr. LaFontaine. And this may not be a question you can answer, but do you have any numbers in terms of how many acres we have planted to a crop like Kernza? Or
I don't have numbers on that. Perhaps one of my colleagues or a member of the Department of Agriculture has that info.
okay, we'll put that one kind of on hold and see if anybody can find it. We've heard about Kernza for a number of years, and it's an exciting crop, but is it taking hold? Is it getting the acreage that it needs to become a viable crop? That would be my question. But again, thank you for your testimony. Nice job filling in. And next up, Missy Blue, identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Greetings, Mr. Chair and representatives. I am Missy Blue of Sturdy Wheat, based in Red Wing. I'm here today as a rural business owner and leader advancing value chains and markets for continuous living cover crops in Minnesota. I am also a recipient of funding from the Developing Markets for Continuous Living Cover Crops program. For over 80 years, Sturdy Wheat has been making pancake mixes, bread mixes, cereals with our own unique process and locally grown grains. I grew up on and around Lake Pepin. Our community and culture relies on the health of the lake and the river. For years, I've been involved in water quality efforts, including serving on the board of the Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance and adopting water and soil conservation practices on our family's grass-fed ranch. Through the funding for the Developing Markets for Continuous Living Cover Crops program, I was able to secure a larger volume of Kernza perennial grain to incorporate across my business's product line and be first in the country to participate in the Minnesota-inspired Perennial Percent certification. This is a national program for businesses incorporating a 1% or more inclusion rate of perennial grains like Kernza into their products. This program has supported my business to be part of the solution to advance continuous living cover agriculture, to accelerate them into the market, and to keep rural Minnesota businesses on the forefront of innovation in agriculture. I request that you please support Bill HF 1677 and allocate continued funding of $500,000 for the Developing Markets for Continuous Living Cover Crops program in this year's final House Agricultural Bill and budget. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? I heard part of you. I was interrupted, but you mentioned you're the first in the nation in a perennial program. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can explain a little bit about that. The Land Institute had launched a Perennial Percent program, which you can be certified to participate in if you're going to include at least 1% of perennial grains into your products that then go into the market. So the idea is upon major adoption, you can really guarantee the market for a large quantity of crops planted, which is part of the reluctance with farmers. You got to make sure there's a market.
So it guarantees some sort of a market for their
If
product?
you can get a large amount of adoptions. So 1% across larger brands will guarantee that they can make use of a large market.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Questions? Seeing none, move to our next testifier. Identify yourself, sir, and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, committee members. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Kurt Kimber, and I run our 240-acre organic farm located 30 miles south of here. Also happens to be Ag Water Quality certified. I'm also a board member of the Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative, which I believe has a strong and innovative leadership team. PPGC, Perennial Promise Growers Co-op, has received funding from the Developing Markets for CLC Crops program to develop the Kernza perennial grain market. And PPGC is playing a critical role in the supply side development of this market. 2 minutes is not enough time, but here are some highlights. PPGC is organizing Midwest Kernza producers. In collaboration with Forever Green, we are hosting the Midwest Kernza Farmers Market Training Conference tomorrow and Wednesday in Waseca. The truly exciting news is that in 2024, the organic Kernza market came alive. After years of lackluster sales, we are going to sell out of organic Kernza this year. Fortune 500 and other large customers are issuing contracts and letters of intent to lock in their Kernza supplies. PPGC is actively seeking more acres and producers. Additionally, we are qualifying a new Minnesota-based Kernza processor. PPGC is working to develop a robust and redundant Minnesota-based supply chain. We work closely with Forever Green, multiplying the state's investment in this critical initiative. PPGC is doing seed expansion for new Kernza varieties, working to reduce the release cycle time from 7 years down to 4 years. Wrapping up, Minnesota has emerged as a leading Kernza producing state. PPGC is making tremendous progress. However, PPGC is going to continue to be grant funded for probably at least the next 3 years. This funding has been critical to our organization. The Developing Markets for CLC Crops Fund are critical, not just for Kernza, but for all the other crops that are in the CLC program. I've tried to paint a picture of the enabling impact that these development funds are playing, and I ask you all to consider funding this fund for 2025 and beyond. You are all welcome to visit our farm to see firsthand the impact of this development program is having, and maybe just we're demonstrating success. We have this funding that's really critical to supporting these, we're basically a startup organization. So it would be wonderful to have that funding continue. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Kimber. So what's happened? How did organic Kernza take off like it did? What's the market?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a great story. There's, I think, there's suppliers that want to have like earth-friendly products, and Kernza is really, has a lot of really wonderful attributes for, being good for the earth. We talked about nitrate in the groundwater quite a bit today. Kernza, I think probably you all know, has this amazing root system that demonstrably removes nitrates from the groundwater, or from the soil, and there's documented success stories on there. And so, corporations want to have products to, sell to their customers that have a brand of being earth-friendly, and so that's the appeal of organic Kernza.
So can you give me an example of some of the actual products, like pancake mix, or what things do they make?
So let me see. There's pasta. So Patagonia has really, they become kind of like an anchor tenant in some regards, and and it's kind of interesting how Kernza is being bootstrapped. A lot of Kernza is going into beer, and that's Kernza's at, we're domesticating a wild grain right now. And so the yields are, they're low, but they're going to ramp up through, work at Forever Green and other, organizations. And so anyway, beer is a place that can sustain that price point. It's also being used in pasta by Patagonia. And then Missy mentioned the, I think another term for it is a little in a lot. So you put, like 1% in a whole bunch of different SKUs. And that 1%, kind of the clever thing about that is if you put 1% of Kernza into a product, you don't have to reformulate it. And so it's like kind of like a quick adoption of it. And then you scale that across many products. And also that 1% per product, it has a minimal price impact on that product, and that kind of mitigates the current high cost of Kernza. And so we're trying to prime the pump here, and I think we're demonstrating some exciting success, and this program has been critical to give Perennial Promise Growers Co-op, which is really a volunteer, staffed organization, to give us some resources to, pursue this work. Otherwise, we're just, a bunch of volunteers with no resources. So the program, I think, is really impactful.
Mr. Kimber, thank you very much. And I think we have somebody who may be able to tell us acreage figures with Kernza. Come on up. Very good. Mr. Kimber, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Hello, welcome to the committee, and tell us your name and give us the acreage figures, sir.
Sure, thank you. My name is Colin Kieritz, and I'm the Director of Commercialization, Adoption, and Scaling for the University of Minnesota Forever Green Initiative. So the Forever Green portfolio is over a dozen crops. With Kernza, we're currently at, I believe, about 5,000 acres nationwide. The largest additions in the last year, this uptake that Mr. Kimber referenced, the largest uptake has been in Minnesota. With crops like camelina, we've gone over the last 3 years from 100 to 2,000 to 5,000 acres. So we estimate there's currently about 5,000 acres in Minnesota and just bordering. Other crops like elderberry, I think, are tripling their production over the last 2 years because this program has supported the development of a new processing line. And we're soon to launch the first new hazelnut varieties out of the program. So we're not quite scaling yet with the hazelnut program. I could share more. I want to keep it brief, but a few other crops in the portfolio is hybrid winter rye. We're not breeding, but we're supporting the adoption of hybrid winter rye, and we're seeing those acres go up substantially on farms. That's a high-yielding, winter annual grain. We've also released winter barley from the program. We're working with a major maltster to pilot our first 1,000 acres or so over the coming 2 years to bring barley production back through a winter breeding strategy. So there's a few numbers. We'd be happy to follow up and send some concise bullets.
Thanks, Mr. Curtin. The one I've heard about is camelina. Mm-hmm. It's an high oil crop, and it's getting some support from, I believe, Cargill.
Correct.
So how is that coming?
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We have a major partnership with Cargill on winter camelina. About 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, we secured a multi-million-dollar gift from Cargill to support the breeding and agronomy, and also open up their doors to advance the breeding of camelina. And they opened their West Fargo plant and contracted their first about 2,000 acres last year, and they've more than doubled that number, we believe. I cannot speak for Cargill. I'm a university representative, but they have expanded contracts and have contracts currently in the market. So that's a highly potentially scalable crop as a cash cover crop that could move to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of acres over the coming decades. Last thing to mention is that this Developing Markets for CLC Crops program supported a farmer in Chatfield, Minnesota, to develop a mobile cleaning unit to help new camelina farmers get their crop to market to reduce the foreign material so that it could get to processor.
Very good. Thank you much for being here today.
Thank you very
and,
much.
Giving that information. See no further questions. Any final comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Chair Hansen.
Thank you. And I was a little unclear, was it 5,000 acres for Camelina or 5,000 acres for Kernza?
That was the
Go ahead,
Camelina
Mr.
number.
Curtin.
Yeah, sorry, 5,000 nationally for Kernza, and the other there were two 5,000s, Representative. The other roughly 5,000 number was for Camelina, just in this region, in Minnesota and the surrounding states.
Representative?
Thank you. And Representative Nelson, I think the key with continuous living cover is that you're not having to round up it in the spring. You're not, the input costs that are concerns for so many farmers, if you have continuous cover, you're not having that additional cost of the burn down and the subsequent tear up for replanting. So I think there's a benefit here. Again, it's going to be different for different people. My concern, and I've expressed this before, is when you make the market, then one way to increase production is to add fertilizer and drive up the yield. So, you know, building in, as you're doing the research and developing the best management practices to emphasize profitability rather than production, I think is wise.
Any final thoughts, Representative Nelson?
Thank you for hearing this bill, and to Representative Hansen, and I agree with you a lot on that. Making sure that profitability is, it is paramount. It's important to keeping our small farmers on the landscape, and I think this is one way to be able to help do that. Making sure that there's a variety of crops there that are able to do that. A number of years ago, after my grandpa had passed away, the family had all gathered around. We're kind of going through some of his belongings, and one of the things they'd found was his ledger book and notes in there. And it was interesting the amount of crops that he had grown, and there's really a diversity of that. And that was most of his farming career was really pre-herbicide, and a lot of it was done with tillage with horses. But at the same time, it was when we look at where what our crop profile is across Minnesota today, it's pretty narrow. And I think in some ways, what was old, can be new again. But I think, having one of the things we've lost is those markets. And we do have growers that are specialized in growing some of the crops my grandpa grew. But, being able to have expand those markets and open it up. I think you give a farmer a challenge of growing a crop, they'll do it. They just need a market to send it to. So with that, I would encourage the support of the bill.
And with that, House File 1677 is laid over. Last bill on the agenda, and we welcome to the committee Representative Huot. And since you're not a member, I will move House File 1292. The intent here is to send this bill to the tech. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear this bill today, committee. Last time I was before this committee, so I'm not a rookie with it. We did the 4-H and FFA license plate, which today we're talking about young farmers again. So this is kind of my space, I guess, with your committee. I was going to bring revenue down here so they could kind of go over the tax code with us, and I was hoping to get them here. I know that all of you are intrigued with this, but we'll do that in taxes.
Yeah, we'll focus on just the ag benefits here, okay?
Okay, I hear you, Mr. Chair. All right, so to begin the bill, this is House File 1292. Minnesota's beginning farmer tax credit was created to incentivize and establish farmers to help beginning farmers throughout selling or renting assets, including land, equipment, and livestock. This is a narrow, tailored expansion of eligibility for the credit. The bill allows beginning farmers to participate in beginning farm tax credit program through a limited liability corporation, which a lot of us know as LLCs, as defined by Minnesota statute. Others allowing LLCs owned by individuals, this bill does not modify the beginning farmer definition. An applicant who whose farm is an LLC still needs to meet all the beginning farmer definition requirements to qualify for the credit. There are several reasons why a beginning farmer would structure their business in an LLC, such as liability protection and shielding their personal assets from business debts or lawsuits. An LLC also helps with succession planning and if the farmer hopes to someday pass the farm on to their children. Today I have with me the person that brought me this bill, or the team that brought me this bill, the Farm Bureau. And also, it sounds like he's also been working with the Ag Department to make this bill even better at this point. So I would like, Mr. Chair, to turn the testifier over to Mr. Peterson.
Welcome. Identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. For the record, my name is Hunter Peterson. I serve as the Public Policy Specialist at Minnesota Farm Bureau. Minnesota Farm Bureau strongly supports this legislation and appreciate Representative Huot carrying it. I do want to add, too, that the ag credit organizations that serve our Minnesota farmers and ranchers, Compeer Financial and Ag Country, are both in support of adding LLCs as eligible to the beginning farmer tax credit. And, you know, I know that there's a department bill that Representative Hansen will be bringing forward on Wednesday that has similar language. You know, I think we're trying to get at the same issue. And just as far as this language that we have here today, the history with this was originally brought forward in 2022 by Representative Miller at the time, worked with the department to come up with it. It did pass this committee unanimously at that time, and it's been introduced. It passed the tax committee and was heard in the tax committee. Whatever reason, didn't get in the tax bill. We didn't have a tax bill that year anyway. But it's been introduced in subsequent bienniums, last biennium by you, Mr. Chair. And so, you know, again, I think that department bill is trying to get at the same goal here. And that bill was only introduced on Thursday, so was able to connect with the department today, and they did express one spot where they think we could improve the bill, Mr. Chair, if they'd be willing to come up and comment on that.
Sure. Anybody from the department care to step up and comment on this bill? House File 1292. Give your name and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Heck. I am the program administrator for this tax credit at the Department of Ag. So the edit we came up with today would be eliminating the additional definition of limited liability company on the second page there, line 3.1. And that's just to help clarify things. So when you'll see at the beginning, we're adding a limited liability company owned by an individual. So just a single member LLC. In the definition referenced in the corporate farm law later, down on 3.1, that is up to a 5-member LLC. So it's just a little confusing to reference that definition when it's not the type of LLC we want to include.
So to be clear, you're supporting the language on page 1, line 10, but not the expanded definition beginning on page 2, line 30? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. What to the bill author, Representative, is that something you are working on or working with the department?
We can definitely do it in the tax committee as we go forward. I would commit to doing that, getting the draft amended, and we can move on from there if this committee chooses to move forward with the bill.
Okay. Any idea, anybody up there, Ms. Heck, possibly how many people this could impact?
I don't have an exact number for you. However, I can tell you that we typically, or last year at least, we had about 439 beginning farmers use the program. I usually get 1 or 2 phone calls a year asking about this, so I think it would be a pretty low number, but very impactful for those people who can't use the program.
Well, just a quick question I would have, being you're limiting it to just one individual. What if there's 2 brothers, for example, that want to form an LLC? With your amendment, that would not be possible, is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct. They could apply as individuals. They could each apply, but not if they had an LLC together.
Okay, Representative Nelson has a comment or question.
Yeah, it was kind of along that same line. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you had a husband and wife, they could have and they could be as an individual, they could be technically partners in an LLC. And I think that would, they could both be young and starting out. So I think overall, I agree with the intent of where you're going, but I think maybe we could expand it just a little bit to really, tailor it to, I think if you got a spousal unit or something like that, I think there's current law, but I think if we could adjust that definition to be able to allow that, because I think that's what the intent is. But I think making sure that's allowed, so.
Representative Huot?
Mr. Chair and Representative Nelson, I think you're right. Again, it would have to be an amendment we put on here to make sure we clean up the language. But I think a familiar family is what we're trying to get at. That it just, as we all know, the family farm is what is the family farm anymore, right? It's not the one I worked on. So I think that. I think I'm open to drafting language that would get us there.
Okay, thank you. Representative Hansen.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think a lot of these are tax questions and, probably could be dealt with there. I think from the perspective, though, of we have a very highly demanded program here with fairly low number of people who currently achieve that program. And so by expanding the pool, we will expand the demand. We should be prepared for those consequences because there's going to be limited funds available. So I just think proceeding with caution on an already highly sought-after program we should think about, but that's a tax question.
Thanks, Representative Hansen. Just discussing if there's a limit to an application. As I recall, it's based on a percentage, like on a cash rent basis, for example. Yeah. Mr. Hunter, would you have any indication as to what somebody would be applying for? A set amount of dollars, or is it a percentage of the cash rent, for example, of the acreage?
Mr. Chair, I am not quite sure about the answer to that question.
I think there's a cap on it, though.
I believe, yes, there is a cap, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Heck, could you help us out here?
Yes, the tax credit, as a reminder, goes to the asset owner, so it's not going to the beginning farmer themselves. It's on a cash lease, 10% of annual rental income with a cap of $7,000.
Okay.
For a sale, that cap is $50,000.
Okay, that's aggregate.
For your annual farm income, you'd get up to $7,000.
Okay. But a one-time?
Not for a rental.
No, but a sale would be a one-time
Correct.
credit. Okay. I think we have that straight. Yeah, it's a program in high demand. Any other questions from members? Anybody in the audience who would care to comment, testify on the program? If not, final comments, Representative Huot.
Once again, committee, thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee, for hearing the bill. I think it's a good start to where we got to get more people involved in ag, and all those future farmers and those 4-H'ers, this gives them an opportunity to start heading that way. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I look forward to the committee's recommendation on this.
With that, I would renew the motion that House File 1292 be passed and referred on to the Tax Committee. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion passes. The bill's on its way. Congratulations, Representative Huot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we've reached the end of our agenda today. Our meeting on Wednesday will be chaired by Chair Hansen. So with that, today's meeting is adjourned.